Okay, this is a story that many people have asked, why haven't we talked about this? Everybody knows, or a lot of people know, that I'm a director of Irving Resources. This is a Japanese focused gold explorer. Irving is a company that Akiko Levinson and I founded way back after Keith Newmeyer and First Mining bought um, our Spring Pole project, or Gold Canyon. They effectively bought out Gold Canyon. We spun out shares to our shareholders of a subsidiary company. At the time, we didn't have assets in Japan, but that's where we landed. We decided to use the Spinco to pursue exploration in Japan. Crescat, like I started with Kevin in 2019, 2020, I guess right around COVID. And it was a year or two later that Crescat took its first position in Irving, and it's actually, you grown over time, we'll say. It's a story that I firmly believe in. It's not without challenges because operating in Japan can be a bit of a head bang at times, and some of you who follow this story know that. Okay, but we have been making good progress lately, and I think, in my view, it's time for the debut. It's time for me to kind of give this pitch of this story to a broader audience. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, and it's basically because of some news that came out. Okay, here you can see the capital structure. It's actually a fairly tightly held company. We have about 74 million shares out. You can see Newmont has 19.9% of the company, and Sumitomo Corporation has 5.4%. We have very close relationships with Newmont and Sumitomo Corporation, and I think it's very important to have those because in Japan, you really need that close association to advance your projects. To once you find stuff and advance things, you need to have that kind of support. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Most people aren't aware of it, but gold in Japan is a thing. Okay, there's been historic mining from a number of gold mines across Japan. The two very famous ones from history are Kushikino, way down there on Kyushu in the south, the lower left, and then the Sado Island, so Sado Kinsan, in the little island in the Sea of Japan, up there, kind of near the center. All right, but now other deposits have been found more, recently. Konamite was found in 1916. It's found by an Inuit. Sorry, not an Inuit. Uh, sorry, my brain is not working today. A prospector and a fisherman found the deposit, and they sold it to Sumitomo Metal Mining in 2016. It made a fantastic mine, multi-million ounce deposit that was mined over about a 6 or 7 decade period. And now Hishikari, way down there, Kyushu, near Kushikino, was actually discovered in the 1980s. It went into production very quickly. Okay, and since 1980, it has produced over 9 million ounces of gold, and at extremely high grade. In fact, the early days, it was running 80, 90 grams per ton head grade. It's dropped now down to 30, 40 grams, but it is a fantastic mine that has a long, long future ahead of it, even. Okay, so it's a major world-class ore deposit. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, there's a fundamental difference in Japan, in the Japanese mining scene, compared to most places around the world. Okay, the Japanese view gold ores, which are mainly associated with quartz veins, as smelter flux material. Okay, what does that mean? Well, mines like Hishikari here, they basically sort the ore that comes out of the ground, and they scavenge that white rock, the vein material, which is quartz, because it has gold in it, but it also has another use. The quartz acts as flux inside a smelter furnace. So they chuck this stuff into a smelter furnace for copper or zinc or whatever, and it helps with the smelting process. It's basically an agent that cleans up the metals as they're melting, as well as keeps the furnace insulated, we'll call it, with heat. Okay. Now the gold, silver, and other things come out of these ores when they're smelted. Okay, so basically, when you chuck this into a furnace, that stuff can then, that silica melts, and the gold and silver come out with the copper and they can be recovered in the electrolytic process at the end of refining. Okay, so it's a wonderful way. Basically, you don't have to build a conventional mill. This material is used as smelter flux. How do they process it? Well, you can see here, these young ladies are sorting out the waste material and they're letting the quartz vein go down the conveyor. It goes into bulk bags, it goes to the smelter. On the floor below this, they screen the material and smaller pieces are sorted using an optical sorter. Does the same thing. It removes the waste material, sends the quartz with the gold onto a smelter. Okay, and then the very fine material, like the sand size material, is basically just bagged up straight away and sent to the smelter. But this means they can produce gold for incredibly low cost. They don't have to build conventional mills. They don't have giant waste piles. It's an amazing opportunity to mine and process gold. Go to the next slide. Okay, this is what gold mining looks like in Japan. In fact, that image in the upper right-hand corner is the Hishikari mine operation. Okay, you could drive down the highway next to this, and you'd think you were going past a carport factory or a diaper factory or whatever. It looks like a widget factory. It's in the middle of rice paddies. There's no waste piles. There's no tailings dam. There's no indication this is a mine even. Okay, you would not know it's a mine, but this is the way Japanese operate. They do it in a very clean, efficient way. Okay, this is how and then the photo in the lower right, that's Honnigh up in Hokkaido. And you can see it's been thoroughly reclaimed. There was no indication of tailings and wastes of any sort. It's a very, very clean setting. It's now closed, but they've done a fantastic job. This is how Japanese view mining. They keep it very clean, very environmentally friendly. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, now the smelter flux industry in Japan is big. They have many, many smelters, base metal smelters all over the country. There's many mining companies, or I should say metal producing companies. These are mining houses that have basically become smelting houses. And they do a lot of metal trading. So that's the Japanese main business. Why? Because they want to support the industries in Japan with the metals they need. Okay, so Mitsui, Sumitomo Metal Mining, Sumitomo Corporation, Nippon Mining, et cetera, all these companies have smelters scattered throughout the country. And all of these things use on the order of tens to thousands of tons, up to a few 100,000 tons of silica-rich rock, okay, for smelter flux. Therefore, there's a huge demand for this material. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so Irving, what are we doing? We've been drilling up in Hokkaido, and I think we're to the point where we have found a significant deposit, and it's drawn the attention of JX Metals. That's the old Nippon Mining. JX Metals Corporation and Irving signed an MOU, or basically announced they're talking with each other a couple of months ago. And those discussions have progressed. I think soon we'll see that reach fruition. And you're going to see this project that we've been working on more from being just an exploration play to a potential smelter flux operation. And it happens because you have to build connections with these big mining houses in Japan to make this happen. Okay, so we are very fortunate to have, and Akiko's been working very hard to build those connections and have the ability now to move this forward. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to have to scoot faster here. I can see. Okay, what are we looking for? First of all, we're looking for low sulfidation epithermal veins, hot spring deposits, okay, in the ground, especially in areas where there's volcanism, like Japan. You get a lot of hot fluids moving around. The magmas inside the ground warm up the waters, and those waters often collect metals out of either the magma itself, or they can pull them out of the country rock inside the ground. Anyway, those hot fluids then find cracks and fissures, and they work their way up closer to the surface. They generate geysers and hot spring pools, just like you see here in the photo. Anybody that's been to Japan knows there's hot springs all over the places. So these things are forming still today. Like Hishikari is only like 1 million years old and change. Okay, it's basically yesterday. Okay, these things are still forming across Japan, but there are just a myriad of these deposits to be discovered. Okay, and these hot spring deposits, as you go down in the ground, you can see a transition. Up at the top, there's what we call a center body. Okay, and that's where the fluids came out and they flow across the surface, and they deposit a lot of their minerals, especially silica, to produce high silica rock. So there's some of that silica that we need. All right. And then if you chase the veins down, the red things down into the ground, those are also made of silica, but they're higher and higher grade as you go down in the ground, into the boiling zone, and where there was a lot of dynamics going on inside the hydrothermal system. That's where you deposit the really high grade material. Okay, so the main precious metal zone is actually often a few hundred meters, like 300-400 meters below surface. All right, so we have preserved on our property several of these systems. Okay, and we've drilled enough to know, yep, they're there, and yep, we can probably mine them, and yep, now we have a partner to do so. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is simply an image showing the Hennigh mine, and it's just a quick image that I want to show to convey a typical Japanese situation here, where you have veins, which you can see over here in the cross section on the right hand side, but they don't actually come all the way to surface. They're kind of blind. They're basically buried underneath the ground, and they tend to occur right at the unconformity between the sedimentary rocks, which are the hatchet rocks, and then the volcanic rocks, which are the other rocks that overlay the top. Okay, that's the kind of sweet spot you want to be in Japan. And at Hennigh, very, very high grade veins were discovered. It's an amazing discovery. They actually were drilling this thing, and the government was drilling it. And they had a budget. It's an interesting story. They had a budget where, typical Japanese, they had a little bit of money left at the end of one of the drill holes, and they thought, well, we can't not spend our budget. Okay, so let's push the hole another 8 meters or whatever it was. And they drilled just a little bit further so they could say they spent their budget like they were supposed to. And guess what? They hit a super high grade vein. That was the discovery of Hennigh. Okay, this first high grade vein was found at the very end, where they pushed that one hole a little bit further, and that turned into an absolutely massive world-class gold discovery. Anyway, go to the next slide. All right, here you can see our projects across Japan. We have some up in Hokkaido, the northernmost island. We have one on the Noto Peninsula, which is part of Honshu, the main island. That is actually where the earthquake happened here recently. And yes, our area was affected. It was very traumatic to see all the good friends that we've made in that area go through such troubles. But we are working with them, and we're going to plan to do some work in the not too distant future. Again, this is an active area. Okay, these deposits are still forming. Okay, and we can see these hot springs in the Noto Peninsula. Okay, down here at the south, Yamagano. This is a big one for us. This project is basically the crown jewel of Japan, and I'll explain why in a minute. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, we're actually going to start way up in Hokkaido. The Omu project is our first project. This project was recommended to us by Mr. Takaoka. Mr. Takaoka-san passed away here recently. Very sad to see him go, but he was the vice president of exploration for Sumitomo Metal Mining for many years. Had a lot of experience across Japan. He knows, or he knew the country well and where to go. And when we worked with him right after Akiko and I entered Japan, he said, "You got to go to Omu." We literally flew the next day or so, Akiko and I did, up here. She managed to track down an old prospector who lives nearby, who held on to one little tiny mining license. And she managed to find his cell phone number from some people by making a few calls. And when we landed, he drove to the airport, picked us up, took us straight out to the mine. I remember walking through the bamboo and stuff. It was just thick as can be, and there's ticks everywhere. It was crazy, poison ivy. And he had a little trench dug. And I looked down in this trench and I said, "Holy cow, Akiko, if that's gold, we got to buy this thing." And I jumped down in there, and sure enough, this quartz vein that he had uncovered was riddled with little bits of gold all through it. It's an amazing site, and that's what led us to Omu. We've been working here for the better part of 7 or 8 years now, I think. And like I said, we've drilled this thing to the point where we actually have JX coming in as a partner soon. Now, The areas that we identified here were actually identified by blood sampling and other work that we did. We have three target areas. There's Omwi, which is down there in the lower right. There's Hokurir, which is in the lower left, and then Omu Center, which is up there in the top right. Okay, so we found three hot spring systems within our claim block. Let's go to the next slide. You can see from Omui drilling, we have hit a large number of veins, typically 1, 2, 3 meters, something like that. Sometimes they're fatter, but you can see often bonanza grade. We have many, many veins that are assaying 10 plus grams gold just on their own, but then with the silver, which can also be bonanza grade, hundreds of grams in places. We have just an amazing string of drill assays out of this property so far. Go to the next slide. And what we found is there's two layers of mineralized veins in this system. There's actually a buried system below the upper one. Okay, so the shallow veins that you see where you see all the reds and purples and stuff, those are high-grade vein hits up in the shallow regime, probably within 100, 150 meters of surface. But then there's another buried system below, and we've hit some very high-grade veins down in that area too. It's more challenging to drill down in that area because of the length of the holes and stuff. But irregardless, we have found basically a stacked vein system that needs a lot of follow-up drilling. And with a partner like JX, I see good things coming. Let's go to the next slide. That's part of the reason I'm talking about this now. Okay, Omu Center. This is that target that's up by the ocean on the slide a couple slides back. It's a hot spring system that's fully preserved. We drilled a number of holes here in 2019, 2020, 21, and even 23. And we hit very high-grade veins underneath the center, but we also hit huge volumes of silica-rich rock right at surface in the center. Go to the next slide. Okay, the veins, I think we have 7 or 8 intercepts here. I can't remember. I think it's 8 intercepts in the vein system that feeds the center, and some very good results. Again, often bonanza grades with both gold and silver. Typical widths, meter or two, up to, in one case, 8 meters. Okay, but this tells you we have a robust vein feeder down below the center. Go to the next slide. And we also have results from the center itself. So all of these holes that you see here are basically very close to surface. They're not super high grade in gold. They're 0.x gram, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8 gram gold. But they also have a fair bit of silver, 10, 20 grams silver. And if you look at this from a gold equivalency, in other words, if you look at it at just a net value of the rock, we get paid for the silica in the rock. Smelters are paying $35, $40 per ton, maybe more now with inflation lately. So they're paying for the silica in the rock, but they're also paying very high payables on the silver and gold. So if they pay 90% plus on the silver and gold, hey man, we got some really amazing rock here. We basically have, $100, $120 rock, just a big sheet of it right at surface. It's something you could go in and start quarrying right away and start putting on barges and shipping down to smelters. And that's why JX is working with us. You can see the silica contents there, very high. And then the deleterious elements are typically fairly low. Those are actually low numbers for most of the arsenic, mercury, and antimony. So very good material. Go to the next slide. Okay, we did form an exploration alliance with Newmont. As Newmont came in starting in 2019, they kept tipping in money. Some of that money was used for exploring elsewhere in Japan or working towards picking up more projects. And one of those projects we worked on or focused on was Yamagano. Yamagano is down in the southernmost island, Kyushu, in Japan, and it belongs to a very famous family, the Shimatsu family, which if you read the history of Japan, basically these were the folks that defended the emperor back in the day, and they were rewarded by being granted lands and this gold mine and so forth. This has basically been in their family for eons. And for a little company like Irving to manage to strike an option agreement, it did help to have Newmont and Sumitomo's backing. In fact, Sumitomo introduced us with Mr. Shimatsu, but it's just almost a dream to think that we could pull something like this off. And yes, Newmont's going to be earning a lot of this project, but you know what? They're spending most of the money too. So it makes it a fairly straightforward exercise for us. In my view, if we find another Hishikari, it's kind of a foregone conclusion at that point. uh, we will likely get gobbled up at some point. That would be the exit thesis, at least. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, this is down in Kyushu. It simply shows where these things are located. Yamagano is over there on the right-hand side, and you can see Hishikari to the north. It's about 11-kilometer straight line from Yamagano to Hishikari. In the world of hot springs, think about driving around Yellowstone Park, okay? Yellowstone Park, okay, you have hot springs and you take the kids and pack them in the car, and then you drive to the next one and the next one and the next one. And they're all about, 10, 12 kilometers apart from each other, 6 or 7 miles apart from each other. That's the same situation here in Japan. These are all forming basically from the same volcanic events, but, they're just multiple hot spring centers that are scattered around the country. And we think we have another one at Satsuma B over there on the left as well. And that's not too far from Kishikina Mine. All right. And again, it's only 11 kilometers. So we have two really robust targets here. But that Yamagano, that's like the crown jewel. Everybody and their brothers try to get that ground. And little old Irving struck a deal. Like Kiko Levinson, hit a sweet spot with Mr. Shimatsu, and off we go. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, this is a very old map, but it's a planned map showing the Yamagana workings. Those little blue squiggles that you see over there, those are the map veins. There's a cross-sectional view on the bottom edge of that map. So you get a sense, there's a lot of veins, and there's a vertical profile of, a few hundred meters, like 300-400 meters of production across those veins. Okay, but that yellow line is really important, because as you hit that yellow line, the topography goes way up. Okay, so it starts rising. And because of that, and because there's younger rock that's been dumped on top of the vein system, you can't prospect in there and find anything. It's like it's too ding dang covered. Okay, think of the cross section I showed for Hishikari a few slides back. Okay, the veins in that area are going to be blind. They're going to be down below the surface. All right. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. That's exactly what we're looking for here. We're looking for Hishikari 2, and we might have found it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we poked one hole down. Guys, I'm telling you, you want to incur huge brain damage. Try operating a drill in Japan, okay, with people that are completely inexperienced and have to train them up. It's a very difficult place to operate. I'm not going to pretend. Okay, but we bought a drill. It's here in Kyushu at Yamagano. It's a board, brand new spanking board drill, great drill, can drill 800-900 meters, no problem. Okay, but it's been a challenge to find the drillers, but we did. Okay, with Newmont's help, again, Newmont's helping us. We found a drill foreman who happens to be a Maori, so he's from New Zealand, but he speaks Japanese. He speaks fluent Japanese, and he happens to be the son of Newmont's, in-company drill foreman. So it's like, wow, okay, this is really good. So he was able to come in and help train up these guys and get everybody going in the right direction. It's like herding cats. Okay, but early this year, I think by March, we completed the first hole at Yamagano. And this was a blind test. It was driven purely on geophysics. And we hit veins. We hit high grade. Okay, we hit 5 meters and 9.6 grams gold. Crazy. Okay, inside of that, 1 meter of 45.9 grams gold. That's interesting. Okay, and then we hit another interval, 1.33 meters of 5.8 grams. Not bad, too. Littler, but anomalous veins below, too. And what's really interesting, go to the next slide, is that even in some of those veins, we saw like the core had little fractures going through it, and it had quartz, which is this gray stuff that you see in these photographs, and there were crystals of gold here and there, okay, in some of these. All right, so they didn't actually make it into the assay bag. So this might have assayed a gram or something, I don't know, I can't remember, but the guys could see little bits of gold after the fact, like, oh my gosh, look at there's actually gold. That's a little crystal of gold, maybe a millimeter or two across. And it occurs. Now, this type of gold, turns out, occurs at Yamagano, which is a few hundred meters to the west. At Yamagano, up in the upper part, near surface, where the old timers found the darn thing, they found these little veins that were just riddled with little bits of crystalline gold. Now, as they went deeper, it turned into more Hishikari type veins, big stout things. But the top stuff actually looked like this. So based on what we're seeing here, we think we've already demonstrated by drilling this hole that there's several Yamagano type veins in this drill hole. Now, we did not get down to the basement. Remember how I said the basement contact is where the real, stuff starts coming up, like the big fat veins and stuff. We weren't quite in that realm, but at the end of the hole, we started to see little class of basement rock starting to pop up. Okay, so based on that, the Japanese geologists think we're hovering just above the basement, and we hit all these veins going down. Okay, so what happens is those veins go down and they hit the basement. They might turn into Hishikari type veins. That's our hope. Okay, that's our target. That's our goal. That's our dream. We need to come back and drill some more holes. We are working towards that. We kind of stepped away and we're kind of reorganizing a lot of the technical stuff. And we're going to come back at it here shortly. Probably in about 5 or 6 weeks, we'll be drilling again. Go to the next slide. Okay, the big blue polygon, that is the old Yamagano mining license. And you can see the little black squiggles in there, very faint. That's the underground workings, map of the underground workings there. That red arrow simply points to where we had that first drill hole. It is well to the east of the workings. So we're probably, a few hundred meters, 300-400 meters away from any workings. And we hit these veins. We hit those veins underneath cover in that blind, buried area. All right. I consider that a win. We've got plenty of drill pads permitted. We're going to drill more targets. There's actually multiple targets here. What are the targets? Go to the next slide. This is what they look. There we go. We did CSMT again with Newmont's assistance. We did very detailed technical work. AMT in this case to identify structures, cracks, we'll call it, in the ground where there's changes in resistivity. So the red and the blue, are different types of rock or different resistivity responses. And then there's a near vertical boundary between the two. Well, guess what? That's where we hit these doggone veins. And that's where we're seeing the gold and stuff. And that thing projects downward. Imagine if that thing goes down a couple hundred meters, 200-300 meters, there might be a Hishikari straight down below there. Okay, so we're going to come back at this and we're going to give this thing a bit more of a test here because this is exciting stuff for a first pass drill program. First hole to hit that kind of gold is very encouraging. Go to the next slide. Okay, that's a vein at Hishikari. Now that is down into the sedimentary rock. So this is what we're targeting. Okay, we want to find a vein that looks like that. In this case, it's a really well banded vein that saw some brecciation, basically got broken up after it formed. But the black rock on either side, that's the country rock. That's the sedimentary stuff. We think things like this could be down there at depth along those resistivity gradients as they project deeper in the ground. And they clearly go down, straight down. So there's a lot of runway on these things.